gave some information to, and then a brother, Urad L, they have been added to the mix. So order your flash drive by, some of you have been texting throughout this particular episode. I'm sending you back information. You probably, if you've already sent me a text, I've already sent you something back. Please support House of Reawakening Minds, even though we're not physically in having our in-person classes. They just tightened the rules even more, so we'll be doing what we're doing.
They're trying to shut humanity down,
right? But we still need your support, because we still pay a lot of things for the building that we're not using like that. So we appreciate your support, and of course, we want and we need to support our Grand Sheik. Our Grand Sheik. We have to support him. You know, it's time out for talking to 1,000, 2,000, 1,200, 1,100 people, and we get 200 notes in. We you know, if everybody sent one note, we would be fine. But we appreciate those of you who have supported us. Please just make sure that you like and that you share, and you know, you just, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to our channel. It helps. We're not trying to get, I'm not trying to do it for monetization. I'm trying to get it so that people know that it's there. So again, we thank you. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and we'll look and see if there's any final comments that anybody, but thank you. Getting that flash. Okay. Yeah. Hope you, their cover's blown. Thank you so much. All right. Well, we're not going to belay. You're still on camera, so I know you look. I know you're tired.
Piece of Rita. I'll get some more tea.
Wait a minute. Let me take you.
That's going on right now with the biological warfare on the people, the economic problems, the so-called, which must be qualified, job qualities problems, etc.
I just have your wrong name up there. It says it's me. Go ahead.
Yes.
This is not Dr. G. This is Grand Sheik Dr. Tarik. We apologize.
Yes. So we need to go over some things to clarify for a lot of people who are becoming aware of how, or somewhat aware of how things have been operating on the planet as of late, particularly because so many people are being injured in many ways. So many families have been systematically and by design destroyed and dissolved and broken up. Relationships, the natural relationship between man and woman has been systematically attacked, to whereas the problems inherent in the social structure are taken as normal today. All of these are residual, what you call fodder, of unum sanctum and doctrine of discovery policy operations by the hybrid Europeans under the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed operations known as Christian colonial operations, which is more a cover of actually Constantine operations on the planet. So we want to bring some things to your attention and trust that you start paying attention to certain things in your life, and also to try to get our people back into the ancient Asiatic African traditions of literature, philology, and reading in general, grammatication, etc. in general, which has been known to be solidly a part of Asiatic African culture, but has been pretty much lost in the Western Hemisphere due to colonial operations. I would like to share with you, since the title we're dealing with is Aboriginal titles and versus Unum Sanctum, we've done multiple angles of sharing information with you relative to Unum Sanctum operations and also the doctrine of discovery. So write those down so that you can do a little bit of research to clarify, because we're not getting into those as subject matter in the immediate. though they're related in the subject matter. They are subjects within their own right. However, because of time constraint, we want to remind you, to those of you who are not aware of what unum sanctum is and the doctrine of discovery is, that you become familiar with that. Because the operations of unum sanctum and doctrine of discovery, the effects that it's had on Aboriginal and indigenous people has been falsely classified under what they have, the social engineers have been calling racism and prejudice. And so the average person who has been subjected to the Frederick T. Gates and John D. Rockefeller education systems will usually respond to the effects of unum sanctum and doctrine of discovery as racism and prejudice, which is actually a diversion, and it actually throws them off of what's really going on. And of course, after generations of this practice, the younger generations have no true reference points by which they can address these problems that they're suffering from, and therefore are sort of like disarmed intellectually and in jurisprudence to protect themselves and their families, etc. It's sort of like being in a situation whereas they give children matches, and then remove water from bottles or something like that, and in place of the water or the bottles, give them gasoline, and then tell them in emergency, pour the gasoline on. And this is pretty much what has been happening to our people in the real world of civics and politics, where they have been trained to keep arguing racism and prejudice and ignore the reality of their sufferings, economic and political, which happens to be colonial occupation under unum sanctum and the doctrine of discovery, which most of you know about this, but very few people, when you listen to people discussing the problems that we've been having on the planet in these late years, they all almost exclusively run to race and prejudice argument, and very few ever talks about unum sanctum and the doctrine of discovery. I'm going to go to Webster's Dictionary of the English Language, and this is Noah Webster, 1828. And I'm going to read to you Aboriginal. Aboriginal is Latin, it's an adjective, and it means the first, the original, the prime, the primitive. Aboriginal peoples are the first inhabitants of a land or country or area, geographical, etc. And in relationship to America, you would be talking about the Aboriginal tribes or peoples of America. And so logically, the Aboriginals of America are the Americans. And so we're going to go again into the dictionary and look up American. And keep these in mind and mark these down. Remember, this is Webster's Dictionary, 1828. And this is to keep our concepts clear as we're discussing these matters. America and American. American. Now, you know that the hybrid Europeans have been going around the world in these late years claiming to be Americans. And when they write the history books for activities that has taken place on the land in the North, they refer to themselves as Americans. As an example, they will write a lot of their escapades as in this manner to throw people off. The Mexican-American War, as an example, that implies that Mexicans are not Americans. See the trap? And then the hybrid Europeans claims to be the Americans. And so it implies that they are Americans or they have a sovereign claim on the land. And people who don't pay attention to what you call connotative linguistics don't recognize that the foundation of a lot of claims are indeed, upon examinations, lies, falsehoods, misrepresentations. However, as people are being trained or so-called educated within these venues, they themselves pick up this connotative linguistics and they promote it thereafter to themselves and to their children in the name of knowledge, in the name of history, in the name of law, etc., and in effect actually abandon their rights of claim by virtually taking on the connotative linguistics, whereas they claim things to be what they are not. And upon this ignorance, or what you will call abandonment of truth or misinformation, the hybrid Europeans take the claim of Americans and then claim the sovereign right, divine right of the people and the land. And this is one of your systematic psychological warfare activities instituted under hybrid European colonial operations of Unum Sanctum. And this is where they have claimed the bodies and the souls of men and instituted it as a governmental policy in all of their colonial escapades. So anywhere where the hybrid European goes around the world, the first thing they do, one of the first things they do is attack anywhere or any places or any established institutions, whereas such as museums or anything that you may look in that type of order, or any of your traditional buildings, steal the artifacts, destroy what they cannot steal, and reconstruct the history. That's called reconstruction. That's one of their favorite words to do. On top of that, change the name of and the appellations of the natural people, and change the names of the geographical aggregate land areas, and then false claim of copyright of the name, claim the land that is named by them that actually belongs to Aboriginal people. The same way for colonial operations, where they would kill off and murder shakuns, potentists, in all of your matriarchs, etc., in Asia and Africa, in relationship to whatever lands they invade, and then claim that position. And so one of the practices that they do is to conquer a people is to systematically genocide the people off and then claim the people's name as a trophy and then promote history under that name, etc., which is also impersonation and impostorship, etc. And one of the things that the hybrid Europeans have traditionally called those operations in a visual format, whereas whether they're doing what you would call theater or singing or entertainment, they would call it blackface. This is where they would take coal oil, or coal pigment, etc., and wipe their pale skins on their faces with it, and then claim to be Moors and Indians, which is another misterm that they have applied to the Asiatic Africans of the North Gate, etc., and then make their unum sanctum claims thereafter. And so one of the things that for most of you who have been keeping up with the House of Reawakening Minds over the years, we've shared with you as an example, when we have suggested to people to go into the congressional records and read in detail House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress, in session with James Trafficant, who they later murdered and said that he had an accident on his farm. They actually eliminated him, or what they like to call neutralized. And he did a speech on the Congress in 93 in that area of time. And he's talking about the U.S. corporation bankruptcy. But in the process of talking about the U.S. bankruptcy, he also reveals the fact, which is not taught in these days, that prior to 1913, that all property in America was held by allodial title or by aboriginal title. And of course, people who know the history are not unfamiliar with that. However, many people don't emphasize that. Here at the House of Reawakening Minds, we emphasize that because it's very important. And it's also, it's sort of like, you ever see those little games that you used to play with children on TV shows, and they'll show little articles or things or toys or objects and say one, these things are not like the other. And it's sort of like a match game. And for adults, they use those kind of things in like in casinos where you pull a lever and try to match either numbers or symbols or faces or things in order to win. It is not unlike that. So today, in today's world, in the political venue of what is known as real property and real estate, etc., and the social engineering operations of what is called mortgages and deeds, many of the people are not aware and never even heard of Aboriginal titles. However, I want to remind all of you who are listening tonight to write that down so you can go into details. What we may do in the future, and one of the things that I had planned to do, but I don't think it would be productive because we always get lost in time, is go over some of the cases in relationship to Aboriginal titles to give you even more reference. We may do that in the future, but what I want to do tonight is lay down these facts to you to get you in a frame of thought, because our people need to actually start getting seriously active to try to slow down the designed destruction of their families and of our communities, which is not beginning, but has always been enforced. However, what's been happening as of late is that they have accelerated those activities. And the different operations of genocide, which are presently happening, including the biological and through directed energy weapons disguised as climate control or climate problems, or, you know, how do you say, the earth is warming type thing, as if seasons don't change. But most people are not aware, and we understand that they're also using directed energy weapons to accelerate the fires that you see, as well as using other micro technologies, some of them called HARP and CERN, etc., to create what you call flooding at the shore areas, etc., and implying to the people that these are natural occurrences, though some of them are, because we have cyclical activities that the people who understand how the earth works in cosmology understand cyclically that these things take place. But of course, you already know that most of our people have not been connected to their African Asiatic history and cultures, and therefore have lost much of the sensitivities and knowledge of the cosmological nature of our life cycles, and including the metrology sciences of how we laid out cities and also villages, etc., and why some Africans are nomadic and some are more stable according to the areas. Well, they are aware of the cosmological relationship with ourselves and nature, and therefore build and design things accordingly. But without having the knowledge of the Asiatic African culture and the metrology principles, many of our people are caught off guard, not understanding that the earth goes through cycles, and that we would design our cities and our towns and villages harmonic with nature. And so things that may not appear to people in contemporary times as being advanced or progressive has more to do with the knowledge of the workings of nature, as opposed to the concepts of solid and very established brick buildings in certain areas, and why do they not do them in all areas, etc. So that's a consideration for you to take into things for you to take into consideration. So we're going to use we're going to look at American and remind you of things that need to be known. America, one of the great continents, and they will say discovered. It's not discovered. That's another false claim. But anyway, by Sebastian Cabot, etc. So it extends from the 8th degree of north to the 54th degree of south latitude, and from the 35th to the 156th degree of longitude west from Greenwich, being about 9,000 miles in length. And that's just a general geographical longitude and latitude designation of America. And understand that America is not Europe, and understand that the hybrid Europeans that came here under conquest operations are not Americans. One of the mistakes that our people keep making is calling them Americans because they have rewritten or reconstructed history and documents and claiming to be Americans, but our people need to know the motive is so they could claim your land. And many of our people, it never dawns on them that those are unum sanctum colonial operations. They are not true realities. They're not true principles of consanguinity. These are not based in blood and pedigree. They're based in conquest. And so you have fake Americans, which would be the corporate United States of America Corporation, registered, a trading company registered in Austria, with its members claiming to be Americans through their corporate activities. And then you have the Aboriginal Al-Moroccans, or descendants of Moroccans, which are called Americans, and in short referred to as Moors, and sometimes tagged as Indians, etc. And so you have Americans, and then you have imposters. So the Americans, so we can get this very clear right up front. American is a native of America. The originals, this is Aboriginal, and originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper complexioned natural peoples of the land. And then later, the hybrid Europeans, under what they call jus soli, which is a legal term meaning that under jurisprudence or under naturalization, and many of them have never been naturalized, call themselves Americans, and then they added that falsely to the definition American, and they have been promoting it for since the 1800s. And this is how it has gotten into the psyche of the people that the hybrid Europeans are Americans, when in fact they're not, never were, and are not. But this is from a political and a conquest position. This is necessary for them to have a foundation upon which they reconstruct history and upon which they make claims on the land and the resources of the Americans by claiming to be Americans, then systematically genociding out the true Americans or Aboriginals. So we want to talk about that. And I think it would be helpful also for people to know these facts. And Dr. Naila, for the people who want this in the future, for the cost of mailing and the printing, you can send this to them. All right, you've had this before. I'm going to read it out.
Okay.
All right. Now this is a general public notice, and this is for Aboriginal people particularly because they've been under the control of the Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation, who has been controlling the medias and the education systems. All natural people, and including the citizens, should be aware of these facts and know that the following are laws and issues applicable at North America via the United States. The following information and facts should be read and analyzed with the knowledge and conditions that the reader is conscious of the lawful distinctions made between constitutionally sanctioned laws, constitutionally sanctioned departments, constitutionally sanctioned offices, and or constitutionally sanctioned entities or activities de jure, and those laws or policies which have been or are constructed under a color of law or under a color of authority, being unlawful, i.e. de facto, or unconstitutional in character, unconstitutional in law, unconstitutional in history, unconstitutional in political form and social concepts. Corrections are always in order. And we have a list of fundamental facts that must be in your mind. This would also give you support in your cognate arguments in relationship to Aboriginal titles, also, which we're talking about here tonight. And we're going to list 33 of them. And so, because much of this, some of you will not retain just in the conversation, go over this tape, go over this video later in your spare time. You can write these things down. And in the near future, we'll see that this information is available to anyone who wants to mail to the House of Reawakening Minds and receive this information. It's not new information. It's just that a lot of people are not aware of these things, which is also why sometimes when we share information, people who are not aware of facts can be influenced by trolls and other people who have been beneficiaries of your ignorance and have been taking advantage of you and don't want you to have this information. And this is, again, why a lot of times when we share information with people, paid trolls will do as much as they can to distract the people or to try to discourage them from paying attention to this information. But with this information, we will give you reference points also so you can recognize that these things are established facts. Number one, the IRS, which you know as the Internal Revenue Service, is not a constitutionally sanctioned United States Republic government agency. The IRS is an agency of the International Monetary Fund, known as the IMF. For your reference, you can see Diversified Metal Products versus IRS at CY 83 405E EJE United States. And this would be in law. This would be Public Law 94 564. There's a little bit more, and it's also in the Senate's records, etc. And that's the reorganization plan that was set forth, number 26, Public Law 102 391. And this is in reference to that because many people right now, particularly since they've been alleged to be in this so-called big debt, etc., are being attacked by agents of the IRS to steal the rest of their estates. And they have no idea that this organization is actually International Monetary Fund and was actually hired by the persons that you thought was congressmen and senators to rob you and to share some of the spoils with them. But it's hidden in what you call slush funds and offshore accounts and so-called aid to foreign countries. That's how they disguise what they've been stealing from the people. Includes why a lot of your economic problems exist today for that purpose. Number 2, IMF, International Monetary Fund, is an agency of the United Nations, UN. And you can find that in your Henry Campbell Black's Law Dictionary, the 6th edition, in page 816. So when the trolls get on and try to tell you that we're making this stuff up, which they will do because they have to do what they're paid for to do, and many of them have been beneficiaries of the ignorance. However, do some research for yourselves and then recognize how you've been attacked by persons you thought was your government and how they've been systematically attacking you over generations and have brought you to this low ebb, which you are right now. And with many people not knowing where to turn, particularly since within months, many of the people will be thrown out on the street in their curb, based on alleged debts that is claimed by persons who claim to be government and who have taken censuses and claim to you to be U.S. citizens and then claim to you to be subject under their American law and actually stealing your estate, which is a completion of the operations of unum sanctum and the doctrine of discovery. It's not racism and prejudice. It's unum sanctum, doctrine of discovery operations. However, you must understand that people who are Aboriginal, who have copper complexion skin, are the Americans. And if you don't make the claim, because you are the American superior, understand that you abandon the last vestige of rights of claims that are left that they haven't already stolen. Problem of it is many people are not aware of it, which is why we chose the title, Aboriginal Titles, versus Unum Sanctum, Doctrine of Discovery operations and claims made by the colonial operators. Meaning that we're making the distinction between the true Americans and the fake ones who are claiming to be Americans that look like this. We used to call them, our forefathers used to call them paleface. It's not a negative. It's only to make the distinction, understand that a paleface is not an American. And that's not to put them down. It's not a slander. It's not intended to be. It's intended to address a problem that really needs to be addressed, because our people are being destroyed by the day. This is aside from the fact of the ritual killings and assassinations that they do with our people to keep them in a low state of mind and in fear in relationship to their rights, not only to the land, but their rights to even life, their rights to travel, etc. All of these are by practice under unum sanctum and doctrine of discovery being attacked and abridged by the fake Americans. And they're not Americans, by the fake hybrid Europeans claiming to be Americans. Number 3, the United States has not had a treasury since 1921 AD. You will find that in 41 Statute, Chapter 214, page 654. Number 4, the United States Treasury is now the International Monetary Fund, known as the IMF. So when you hear them saying the U.S. Treasury, the United States Treasury, they're actually talking about the IMF. Know that to be the fact. And that would be found in Presidential Documents, Volume 24, Number 4, page 112. United States Code, Title 22, etc., 284, 2887. Number 5, the United States does not have any employees because there is no longer a legitimate United States. No more reorganizations. After over 200 years of bankruptcy, it is finally over, and that is known as Executive Order 12803. I repeat, Executive Order 12803. Number 6, the FCC, the CIA, the FBI, and NASA, and all of the other alphabetical gangs were never a lawful part of the United States government, even though the United States government, through its trustees or representatives, which you know as the congressmen and senators, etc., all held stock in the agencies. So the truth of the matter is, this can be proven in U.S. versus Strang, S-T-R-A-N-G, 254 U.S. 491, and in Lewis versus U.S., etc. Now, these can be referenced in law and in law cases so that you can see that these persons who are claiming to be congressmen and senators are actually trustees for the foreign FCC, CIA, FBI, NASA, etc., which are all foreign entities operating on the land under the doctrine of discovery and under unum sanctum operations. And so therefore, you need not be confused about what's been happening to you and your family and your children, and where as commercial mercenaries have been systematically and ritualistically pulling men and women out of cars, out of their vehicles on the streets and murdering them before a lot of people, and nothing occurs, even though people may be standing there with cameras and cell phones, etc., and they not understand why this stuff is happening, etc., and may protest or complain, but they need to know that those are unum sanctum operations. And those persons are sent out there by those very people you've been calling your congressmen and senators, who are trustees for the IMF, actually, and not literally and honestly, not your government. They are actually, in this unfortunate reality, your enemies. They're not your government, although they're governing over you. You must make that distinction. They are not Americans. They are unum sanctum doctrine of discovery operators and members of the Roman Curia. And I know it's uncomfortable, but you need to get over it and start getting real about your life, because they've been real about starting to take the people's lives without recourse. 7, Social Security numbers are issued by the United Nations. How many of you knew that? Now you do. That Social Security numbers are issued by the United Nations, and the United Nations is the IMF. Keep that in mind. So when you see the US, the IMF, and the United Nations, they're all one and the same extended entity operations under unum sanctum and doctrine of discovery, under different names to keep the people confused. So Social Security numbers are issued by the United Nations through the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and the application for a Social Security number is the SS5 form. And the Department of the Treasury, which is really the IMF, issues the SS5 forms and not the Social Security Administration. That's a front and a fraud. It's issued by the International Monetary Fund. And the new SS5 forms do not state who publishes them, while the old form states they are from the Department of the Treasury. And you'll find that at 20 CFR Council on Foreign Relations, Chapter 111, Subpart B, 422-103. So keep this in mind. These are common things that should be known by everybody in their everyday operations, so they're not continuously blindsided by the political and economic attacks which are made by persons who keep claiming to be your government, who keeps claiming to be your mayors, who keeps claiming to be your governors, who keeps claiming to be your congressmen, who keeps claiming to be your senators, and keep claiming falsely to be creatures of the Constitution and treaties, both of which they are not. They are in fact imposters and operators for the doctrine of discovery, and their claims upon you has created the false so-called national debts that they've been perpetrating against the people, and then which they are now making claims to collect on, which is really what the debt is and what the real problem that you have going on in what is known as world trade markets, or windows freezing up, and the credit markets freezing up, the credit windows of the world freezing up. And of course, in the process, their claims are to be recognized as debts, and their claim are and have been for substance, that is gold, silver, and the people's estates, i.e. the land, and all of it, not just the fiat that has been issued, the private commercial paper that has been issued by members of the Curia under the Federal Reserve. It is also the mortgages and deeds that they have falsely placed on the land since 1913, upon which they have been making their claims. And understand the counter to this. Number one, with the Aboriginal people, they're counter to this because they have very few defense mechanisms left, because they have been pretty much subjugated almost totally. And the families have been destroyed, private and personal relationships have been destroyed, and their economics has been destroyed, and therefore they have very little resource to fight back with. The international principle and the divine principle upon which the right of claim is made is called nationalization. That's number one. The estate claim would be what is known as aboriginal title. What's been taking place around the country in small areas and small venues, and the information and the activities have been suppressed. The civic activities have been suppressed, and most of these activities have not been published for the public to go over. But you'll find it taking place in the Western Hemisphere and in other parts of the world, and up north to Australia, etc. Is Aboriginal peoples, i.e. Moors, making Aboriginal claims in the corrupted judicial systems, and in some places winning. For those of you who are able to do some research, you can look at a couple of cases that are going on right now in this current time in Canada, or what you call Canada, etc. And one of those cases I'll share with you in the future. That was one of the things that I was going to introduce tonight, but because of time constraint and because I was actually busy, I had limited time to get things together and make my travels down here. So I'll use a future reference for that. But I want you to look at Aboriginal title cases, contemporary and current, going on in the Western Hemisphere, or activated at this time in the Western Hemisphere, and you're going to find some of those cases which are happening. However, what we've been trying to do, on another hand, is get the Aboriginal people at North America who has been wrongly governed and misgoverned and miseducated and misdirected at North America under Roman Curia members who are owners of the United States Corporation Company, which is an occupational colonial force of subdivision of the hybrid Europeans of Britain, of Europe, etc., of England, etc., to become active and to start making Aboriginal claim of the land, etc., and logically all accoutrements in relationship to it, including the resources, are part of their right of inheritance. To interrupt, or what you would call to obstruct or to escheat the Aboriginal people, it has much to do with the clever legal processes of obstruction that have been known traditionally as branding or tagging, and the nom de guerre systems, which most of you know about, etc. So brands would be terms terms, not consanguine pedigree identities. They would be terms. Such terms have been known as Negro, Black, Indian, Latino, nigger, persons of color, etc. All of these terms which have been trained by the Gates Foundation for the people to accept as consanguine are in fact nom de guerre, but the purposes that they serve for the progenitors of these tags is that it disconnects the people from right of claim and also disconnects them from a lawful process to make aboriginal claims, because there's no such people that have claim to the land. These are persons who are tagged by hybrid European colonial occupiers in the Western Hemisphere. Although these tags have been promoted and projected around the world via media, via filmed, via reconstructed books, etc., however, they're still false, but their purpose and function have been very successful for the hybrid Europeans in making their so-called American claims, and therefore taxing people and charging Aboriginal people to rent their own lands. And this has been going on for decades, and our people didn't even know that the rents that they were paying on their own land is all a fraud. But they assumed that the people who were governing and who had set up municipal government were actually legitimately Americans, when in fact they were not, are not, and never will be. However, and it's unfortunate also, is that the true Americans have to stop claiming to be something in who they are not, i.e. that includes all of the nom de guerre that I just mentioned and other tags that were put on the Moors, etc., the Almorocans. So when you hear me say Moor, that's simply short for the Almorocans or descendants of Moroccans, etc., the true Americans, etc., many of which and of whom over the years being miseducated by the Frederick T. Gates Foundation, which is the partner of John D. Rockefeller, who set up the entire education system, the General Education Board, which is that the foundation of all your learning institutions operating on our land, particularly since the area of 1902, have had control over the people's points of reference, etc. And of course, the doctrine of discovery is the claim where, from a legal perspective, that the hybrid Europeans have been claiming land parcels all over North America, etc. And you also, for some of you, and my son, Dr. Hannibal, had shared with me a video earlier this week. We were talking, and he shared with me a video, which I'll share with Dr. Nail a little later. And you'll see, even with the treaties with many of the Americans, our brothers from the South, known as Mexicans, whereas they're bringing up the treaties where these hybrid Europeans have been claiming areas of California, Texas, etc., which are really part of Mexico, Nevada, etc., and from a law perspective have proven these people to be a fraud. And rather than give the land back, they're burning a lot of the land, etc., doing fracking to make the water toxic and things like that, relative to the future potential of the people regaining rights to their land. However, I'm also encouraging the Aboriginals of the North to start becoming more active than you have in relationship to your birthrights and your nationalities, and make rights of your Aboriginal title claims, even though there will be resistance, because it's, put it this way, their intention is to kill you off. Your intention is to be passive and inactive. It's almost like what you would call a surrender or an abandonment of your claim of right to the land. And of course, a surrender that you're surrendering those rights. And a lot of people are not aware that a lot of the political activities that are taking place right now on the planet, with a lot of the biological warfare that's been instituted against and upon the people right now, that they think is something else, is part of the doctrine of discovery operations, because they recognize that the people are waking up and they really need to accelerate killing them off. And there's two other things that they've been doing systematically to accelerate the genocide activities. And that is where they've used the Christian black codes to become between men and women. Whereas you'll see in these days, men and women are, rather than harmonizing with each other, are competing with each other as enemies and think that each of them are the problem, not knowing that there's a puppeteer in the background. And that's these people who you thought was your government, who are actually executing doctrine of discovery policies. And it's actually gotten so bad that you'll see that many men, and I've known many of them, and actually even myself being among them, that don't even participate in that mating game anymore, knowing that if you deal with someone who's under the Christian black codes, that they will indeed destroy you. And it doesn't mean they don't care about you, don't mean they don't love you, etc. But they don't know that there's a puppeteer behind all of these operations to break up families. And in reference to their directives under the doctrine of discovery, many of you who have Executive Order 11490, well-known, commonly known as the King Alfred Plan, and the Rex 84 Plan, where they inform the politicians and the corporate owners of corporations under them to do such things that are necessary to dissolve the families of all Aboriginal peoples. And I think a lot of times people don't pay attention to it because they've been sacrificing some of their own in order to cover up the doctrine of discovery operations. And so when the people start seeing the destruction of the families, etc., and the destructions of relationship by virtue of the social engineering, they'll say, look, they're doing this to everyone, as a rationale to overlook the fact that the Aboriginals are and were the target. However, the collateral damage that is done by throwing, as some people use in the colloquial term, throwing under the bus a lot of so-called lower class and middle class hybrid Europeans who they will tag under the Wigmore Party as white people. Is 1854 Knights of Columbus Ku Klux Klan oath, where the hybrid Europeans start calling themselves Americans and then start calling themselves white Americans, etc. Understand that that is a political platform, a train of thought that is promoted in 1854 on up, etc. However, they're being thrown under the bus in the collateral operations of unum sanctum claims and doctrine of discovery claims. That you'll read about these activities in under such titles as the middle class is being destroyed. You'll hear those terms in the main media, mainstream media. Middle class, jobs lost, things like the airlines are getting ready to lay off 100,000 people, terms like that. What that really is, it's ongoing genocide operations where they're sacrificing some of their own to cover up the unum sanctum doctrine of discovery operations. Again, this is why it's important for the Aboriginal people to start making Aboriginal title claims to try to save, because we understand this, let's be real about this. Not going to save a lot of people, because a lot of people refuse to deal with knowledge. A lot of people have been late to the responsibility of self-governing or trying to govern their own lives. And a lot of us are going to be sacrificed because of the ongoing, not coming, the ongoing war against us, etc. Dr. Naila, yes.
I just wanted to add, you were talking about the relationships between melanated men and women being, strained and under attack.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm looking at on the page of BLM,
Mhm.
You know,
It's part of it.
and I'm looking at about them. And so when you read this, it says, we affirm the lives of Black, queer, and trans folks, disabled folks, undocumented folks, folks with records, women, and all Black lives along the gender spectrum. Our network centers those who have been marginalized within Black liberation movements. What's missing from that statement are men, our melanated men. They don't say anything about the man. They don't say. I mean, of course, you know, folks that have been folks with records, but not all of our men have records. So they don't specifically say anything about the man.
Of course not.
About the family.
Of course not.
And what they're, you know, what they're about has nothing to do.
Of course not. Now, the system's not broke. The system works very well. The problem that the people have in general when they look at things like this, right, is they look at it from the perspective that, quote unquote, the system is broke. No, the system works perfectly, and it has the system instituted under doctrine of discovery has been successful in dissolving the family. You got to remember, and this is not a mark or a strike against people who are either gay or lesbian or anything like it's not even a strike against them. That has been pushed as part of the genocide operations. See, just like this, a woman and a woman does not produce life.
True.
And it's against nature. It has nothing to do with the person or the person's personality or whether they're good people or bad people. We're not even condemning it. You know, we just look at the facts. A man with a man produces no life. Woman is the gate of life, no matter how you twist it, fold it. Man and woman is the foundation of nature of life in all species, in nature, in divine law. That's not condemning people who are gay. That's just a fact. But what the people don't understand, I think very often, because you'll see them emphasizing it now or getting people to accept it under the guise that they care about people. But people should care about people because they're human beings, not based on their sexual orientation. But you notice how that's skipped over because the fact of the matter is this is the fact. All right, number one, males are outnumbered by female by nature because this is how nature works, right? So if they can separate families, get young males to start thinking about trying to be a woman, inducing the young males that they cannot make a living to serve their families unless they do drugs or sell drugs because they'll lock them out of other parts of resource acquisition or control. Use women to promote this and use women under the Black codes to emasculate their men, which will cause a greater divide. And when you have men who would have a desire to support and to protect their families, to be condemned by women as being anti-feminist type thing. And then you have jailing of young men at a very young age. Then you have them being drugged in schools. Right. Now, keep this in mind. Nurses, school nurses, feeding prescriptions to children, even against parents' wishes, they're not doctors. And they're not pharmacists. How is it that they are licensed to drug children? It's because they're targeted. So you'll see them, if you'll see a lot of these activities in school where they're drugging the children, if you do any research, you'll find that the major target is young males. Usually the women or the young females are more protected. And so people don't pay attention to the fact that they're attacking the young males. And this is actually part of the genocide operations of Unum Sanctum and the doctrine of discovery to tear the family apart. And of course, these young men growing up are not aware until a later age that their role as protectors and providers for their families have been neutralized at a very young age. So many of them get out into the world of family totally handicapped, totally disabled, having no access to the resources of the land, not knowing that the land is theirs, having no access to the economics, not knowing that the resources that create the economic are theirs, thinking that the people who are governing over them and their families, whether under the guise of human services or family services, etc., under the Margaret Sanger operations of family planning, under the abortion clinics, which are all part of the Margaret Sanger operations, of the genocide operations of Unum Sanctum and the Doctrine of Discovery, having no idea that these are actually continued institutionalized acts of war against them. And as they grow up, not recognizing that the females are being trained in many instances to be agents of the state against their own interest, against the male, and over a period of time are actually helping to destroy their own family structures, which is, of course, is what you're experiencing right now on many fronts, in many areas across the land, etc. And not knowing that all of this is being engineered